the lungs with their associated exercises. The final of the 5 major organs are the lungs. The idea that there are emotions associated with the lungs, as well as colours, sounds, smells, you name it, well, the lungs' negative emotions are the heaviest of them all. Sadness, shame, guilt, grief, and sorrow. There's an awful lot of weight there. There's this idea in Chinese medicine that our lives go in 7 or 8 year cycles. 7 is for boys and 8 is for girls. So the theory states that in the first formative years, we have absolutely no emotional filters developed at all. We're like sponges. We take in everything we see and hear on some level. God forbid you should lose a parent during this tender age, or maybe the loss of a lovely grandparent who has always protected you. Perhaps you had to deal with an alcoholic or abusive parent. Perhaps you were overburdened with the weight of being 6 years old and told you were already a terrible sinner and responsible for the death of Jesus. Perhaps you were bullied at school. Perhaps you were told stories about how poor your family was, or how undeserving you were, or maybe even how unwanted you were. Well, children pick up things very easily and also on an unconscious level. Even if your parents treated you well, but they hated one another, you take this on and it clogs up your lungs. Sadness, shame, guilt, grief, sorrow. Phew. In Chinese medicine, the lungs are seen as part of the skin also. If you think of germs or bacteria on your hands, it's really the same idea as breathing the same into your lungs. The skin and the lungs are like the last line of defense of the body. It's no great surprise then to see the dramatic rise of eczema and asthma in Western children. I think both direct indications of lungs out of balance, as our poor children struggle with the complexities, both chemical complexities and emotional complexities of modern life. Stress. As we go through life, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune build up in our lungs, leave us struggling to breathe. I often find, and sadly this is particularly prevalent in ladies, that we stop breathing from the belly. It's almost a pant in the upper chest. Breathe deeply, people. Use your tummy. Okay, so the lungs represent the autumn. Their colour is white, silver or grey, and the element is metal. Think of a shining sword blade rather than a rusty spade, which doesn't give you the right colour for lungs at all. Lungs out of balance would obviously be coughs, bronchitis, colds, shortness of breathing. We discover that the lung is partnered with its yang organ, large intestine. So principally when we think large intestine, we think of the colon. The important function of the colon is seen as excretion, getting the garbage out of your body. But this is on an emotional level too. So illnesses associated with the colon might be constipation or diarrhea, a spastic colon or abdominal pains. But more importantly, are you hanging on to all the old crap that you should have let go of years ago, emotionally speaking? The whole point of grief is to experience and then clear the heavy stuff around death and loss. Just as a side note, I think it's wonderful how family pets help prepare us when we're young for big losses, hopefully a bit later on in our lives. Losing a pet is like practicing for the loss of a close relative in later life. It's much easier if you have grief modelled to work through, and the basic understanding that you will get over it in time. But the question is, you bottle it all up inside. It's the stiff upper lip idea that leads to chronic illness in the lungs. It's much better to allow things to flow, not to get bunged up. It's interesting to note that in our culture, it's black that surrounds funerals. But for the Far East, the colour is white, representing clearing, representing clearing of grief. So, on a practical level, ginger tea is really good for supporting your lungs. You could also add a little bit of cinnamon or cardamom to your tea too. The obvious thing to do to help your lungs is to breathe. There are a million breathing exercises, but simple belly breathing is good for a start. Sit or stand or lie down and breathe in whilst inflating your belly like a balloon. You could hold your breath for a few moments and then exhale, squeezing the tummy muscles to flatten the stomach and push all the air out. And then maybe you could pause for a moment or two in that position. Have you ever watched a baby breathing? It's all about the tummy. When did we lose the ability to do that? Well, the answer is about 7 or 8, when things started to change. It's a curious first puberty that nobody even notices. All your teeth fall out. How do we miss that? You'll note, that's when you first start to be able to protect yourself emotionally also. Each of the major organs has a sound that helps stimulate it. How fantastic to find there are these lovely tools built into our bodies to help us heal ourselves. The lung sound is a particularly good one. You take a deep breath in and hiss, S, out. It vibrates the little alveoli and loosens up the emotions while clearing the airways too. I always think about your lungs as being like 2 bags with broccoli stuffed into each one and the little alveoli on the ends vibrating.